Dear students and teachers, welcome to today's our digital lesson. We have learned that cell is the basic structural and functional unit of the life. We also learned that differences between the plant cell and the animal cell. As we know that these all the cells which are similar in their structure and function, they combine and they are going to form a tissue. We also know that the animals and plants are composed of with the tissues. Now, let us think. In these animals and plants, these tissues are similar or they are different. Suppose you take the plants. In the plants, we have the tissues. These tissues are they are all similar or they are different. Do they have the different in their structure and function? And the similar way in animals, do they have the similar tissue or different types of tissue? In plant tissue, we have observed that different functions are going to be carried out by different tissue. We will see the similar thing happens in animals too. Today we are going to discuss about epithelial tissue and connective tissue from the lesson Animal Tissue, class 9th Biology. Children, let us see today's lesson's objectives. Students are able to identify different types of animal tissue. Students are able to know the locations of epithelial and connective tissues. Students are able to know the structure of epithelial and connective tissues. Students are able to know the functions of epithelial and connective tissues. As we know that our body is made up of different organ systems such as digestive system, respiratory system, circulatory system, excretory system, muscular system, nervous system and reproductive system. All these organ systems perform different functions. Each of these systems are made up of organs and these organs are made up of tissues. With the help of these tissues, the organs and organ systems carried out different functions. Like in plants, animals also have different types of tissue to perform different functions. Some tissues covers and protect the body, some tissue helps in movement of our body, some tissue helps to connect the body organs, some other tissues help in carrying information to process. Now, all these tissues are divided into 4 types based on their structure and function. 1. Epithelial tissue, 2. Connective tissue, 3. Muscle tissue, 4. Nervous tissue. Let us have a brief introduction about these 4 types of tissues. 1. Epithelial tissue. It protects and covers the animal body forms inside and outside. The connective tissue. It holds the other tissues together and are surrounded by lots of non-living materials. And the third one, the muscle tissue is, it will shortening and lengthening to move other tissues. And the fourth one is a nervous tissue which is responsible for responding to external and internal stimuli. Now, let us discuss about in detail epithelial tissues. Here epithelial means, epi means outer, thelium means tissue. This tissue is basically a membranous tissue which covers inner and outer layers of the organs. Epithelial tissue forms outer and inner linings of different organs like lungs, stomach, mouth, intestine and reproductive organs. And this epithelial tissue is again further divided into 3 types based on their structure. The first is the squamous epithelial tissue. If you observe this tissue, these cells are very thin and flat. And the second one is a cuboidal tissue. In this tissue, cells are cuboidal in shape, or we can say they are roughly square in shape. And the third one is columnar epithelial tissue. In this tissue, the cells are elongated. The column like structures, if you see here the diagram, you can observe that these cells are arranged in columns. Hence, these cells are, this tissue are called columnar epithelial tissue. Now, let us see about squamous epithelial tissue, and it is where this squamous epithelial tissue is located, and its structure and also its functions. So, when come to its structure, the squamous epithelial tissue is extremely thin and flat, and it forms a delicate lining in esophagus, blood vessels and alveoli, and its functions are they involve in transportation of substances selectively through a permeable membrane. Now, cuboidal epithelium. This tissue forms the lining of organs and tubules, and all these cells are in cuboidal in structure and have a similar function to provide a mechanical support to the organs and tubules. Now, columnar epithelium. These cells are present in intestinal and skin linings. Cells in this tissue are similar in their structure and perform a similar function. All these cells are columnar in structure and helps in absorption and secretion. Now, in epithelial tissue, we also find another type of tissue where this epithelial tissue is going to form different layers. Till now, we discussed about only these epithelial tissue are in a single layer, but if this epithelial tissue forms in layer, what do we call these type of tissue? These are called stratified epithelial tissue. So, here what happens, the epithelial tissue is going to form the layers. It could be 2 layers or more than 2 layers. Now, let us see here the squamous epithelium. If it has got only one layer, we call it as a simple squamous epithelium. If it forms more than one layer, we call it as a stratified squamous epithelium. In a similar way, in cuboidal epithelium, if it is a single layer, we call it as a simple cuboidal epithelium. If it forms layers, more than one layer, we call it as a stratified cuboidal epithelium. In a similar way, in the columnar tissue, if this columnar tissue, if it forms a single layer, we call it as a simple columnar epithelium. If it forms more than one layer, then we call it as a columnar stratified epithelium. And we also find pseudo stratified columnar epithelium. It looks like it is a single layer, but it looks like more than one layer, but actually it is a one layer only, but it looks like more than one layer. That is the reason we call it as a pseudo stratified columnar epithelium. Dear students, let us think on these questions. How our internal organs located at their specific places without displacement? how our internal organs are located at their specific places without displacement. For example, we have heart, lungs, liver, kidneys. These are at their specific places and they do not displace in other places. How does it possible? Let us think. How different organs in our body packed at their places. Sometimes fat is stored in our body. Where does this fat is stored in our body? Our body has a specific shape. Which organs are giving this specific shape to our body? All these are carried out by a tissue called connective tissue. So, this connective tissue is a most abundant and most widely distributed tissue in our body. These tissues provide support for organs and the body as a whole and protect and insulate internal organs and compartmentalize structures such as skeletal muscles and nerves. And this connective tissue further divided into 4 types based on their structure and function. 1. Areolar tissue, 2. Adipose tissue, 3. Bone and cartilage, 4. Blood. Now, you see this areolar tissue, the main features. These areolar tissue is they have different types of cells and fibers, and the cells includes mast cells, fat cells, and the fibers are fibroblast and collagen fibers. And this areolar tissue functions are, it involves in support and strength, and also it gives elasticity among different body parts. And where do we find this areolar tissue in our body? This tissue is going to joins and packs the different organs in our body. Adipose tissue. Now, let us see what are the main characteristics of this adipose tissue. This adipose tissue, they have a large fat filled adipocytes, and they also contain lipids and fat globules. And how does this adipose tissue help us? And it is going to store energy, and it also conserves the body heat, and sometimes it acts as a cushion and protects many organs, and it also fills the spaces between the organs, and also it gives the shapes to our body. And where do we find this adipose tissue? We find it beneath the skin, around the kidneys and heart, and around the eyes, breast, abdominal membranes. Dear students, press on your tip of the nose, pull your ear pin. Now see, are they in their original shape? Did they change their shape? They are in their original shape. Who made it possible? It is a soft bone called cartilage. Now we will see what are the characteristics of this cartilage. This cartilage is widely spaced cells in small cavities, and it has got a rubbery matrix. And what are the functions of this cartilage? And this cartilage is makes the joints to move easily. It resists the compression at joints, and it holds the airway open. Here what is the airway? We have here our tracheas. So, tracheas are open. So, air has to pass through trachea. So, this cartilage is going to make this trachea is open, and it also gives the shape to our ear. And this cartilage also has got a main function, it moves our vocal cords. Vocal cords are present in our larynx. We also call it as a sound box. So, this cartilage which is present in vocal cords helping us to talk. And where do we find this cartilage in our body? We find it in external ear, larynx, rings around the trachea, joint surfaces and growth zones of bones, between ribs and sternum, and in intervertebral discs. These intervertebral discs are present in our vertebral column. Do you know, students, how do we bend? Because of the presence of this cartilage in between intervertebral discs. Students, think, how do we got a specific shape to our body? It is a skeletal tissue which will give us a shape to our body. Assume that you do not have a bones in your body, you do not have a skeleton system in your body. What happens? Will you get a shape to your body? Students, think, could you able to sit, stand, run or do any work without these bones? So, we have a specific tissue in our body which perform these functions. The tissue is known as skeletal tissue. We also known as it is a bone tissue. Now, let us see what are the characteristics of this bone. This bone has got a widely spaced cells with much of matrix in concentric onion like layers, and it has got a hard mineralized matrix. Now, how does this bone help us? The bone physically supports the body, it provides the movement, it encloses and protects soft organs, stores and releases the calcium and phosphorus minerals. And where do we find this bone in our body? We find it in our skeletal system. Dear students, we know that these bones are going to make a skeletal system. How these bones are connected to each other? How these bones are connected to the muscles? We have a specific tissue which connects bone to bone and bone to muscle. We call this tissue, the specified tissue is known as ligaments and tendons. The ligaments are the flexible tissue which joins bones together and helps in movement, and the tendons are the fibrous tissue which joins muscles to the bones and helps in movements. Dear students, now we will summarize what we have learned today. The animal tissues are basically divided into 4 types, that is epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue and nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue further divided into squamous epithelial tissue, cuboidal epithelial tissue, columnar epithelial tissue, ciliated epithelial tissue and glandular epithelial tissue. Connective tissue further divided into areolar tissue, adipose tissue, skeletal tissue, fluid connective tissue. Now, areolar tissue further divided into tendons and ligaments, skeletal tissue we have bone and cartilage. The fluid connective tissue we have blood and lymph. In muscular connective tissue we have striated muscles, smooth muscles and cardiac muscles. About the blood and muscles nervous tissue we are going to discuss in next class. Dear students, we will see what are the main important points we have discussed in today's lesson. Cells with similar structure and function combine and form the tissue. In animals, different functions were carried out by different tissues. Based on structure and function, animal tissue broadly classified 4 major groups: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue is a membranous tissue covering internal and external organs and other surfaces of the body. Based on the shapes of the cells present in epithelial cells, they are subdivided as squamous epithelium, cuboidal epithelium, columnar epithelium. Connective tissue is a framework formed by fibers and cells and supports the structures and body tissues and organs. Based on the shapes of the cells present in connective tissue, they are subdivided as areolar tissue, adipose tissue, bone and cartilage. Dear students, now discuss these questions with your teachers. Locate heart, kidney and liver in your body. Were all these organs are made up of similar tissue? If not, find out the different types of tissue present in it. Some of the tissue is formed in multi-layers. Why do you think so? Think certain types of tissue consist of only similar type of cells. How does bone differ from cartilage? What is the function of cilia present on columnar epithelium? The tissue present in eye cornea and tissue present on tongue are similar? If not, how do they differ? Dear students, today we have learnt about epithelial tissue and connective tissue. In the next session, we are going to discuss about a new topic.